And now, it's Boomer Life, lifestyle discussion designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
And welcome to Boomer Life on CIL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton. And for the next hour, we welcome our guests from the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia. Today's show is going to continue the conversation about the work of the Society and to focus on quality of life for families on the dementia journey who have connected with the Alzheimer's Society of BC. We're here to help educate and inform with some special guests who are going to share their stories of their journey with you. And to start, we welcome Maria Howard, who is the CEO of the Alzheimer's Society. Now, Maria has been at the core of this conversation and show, both because of her decades of experience in the health sector, also her position with the Society, and also because of a personal investment. It's her mother that has dementia, like many of us. This disease has touched her life as well. So, Maria, I just want to say thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Joanne. It's great to be here as always.
Excellent. And just before we start, can you just share with us a little bit about the work that you do as the CEO for the Alzheimer's Society?
My role for society really is to help create awareness and opportunity to bring the information and the awareness of the society and the help that we want to provide British Columbians to the community. It's a really important role. There are so many people in our province who are dealing with family members or people who are close to them who have Alzheimer's or a type of dementia. And really, it's so important to be able to reach out to them and let them know they are not alone. There's information, there's education, there's support that can be there. We also focus very heavily on fundraising. 90% of the revenue that comes into our society is purely through donations and fundraising. And it's really important to raise those dollars to give back to the community in the ways of our resource centers and our education, but also for money for research to hopefully one day find a cause and a cure.
Excellent. I think it's great for the Society to have somebody so passionate at the helm as well. So the last time we were together, we talked about the Society's First Link Dementia Support Services, and we heard some stories firsthand from some people that are actually on the dementia journey. Today, we're going to continue this conversation and focus on the issue of wandering. And of course, how it relates to people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. But before we begin, as always, we would like to remind our listeners that there's a lot of information about the Alzheimer's Society online. So I encourage you to visit the website, which is alzheimerbc.org. And Maria, this week, you and I are going to be talking with our guests about this topic of wandering. It's an issue which is often in the news, and it's an issue which I imagine you must get asked a lot of questions about.
Wandering is a really common question from the families that we interact with, as well as people with dementia that we are working with. It is natural that people wonder about wandering, wonder how it's going to touch them, wonder what they should do. We do hear lots of stories about wandering in the media, and unfortunately, often the stories that we hear are the ones that don't have a happy or a good ending. And so that just increases people's anxiety and concern more about how to manage this. And so it's really important, as we have been doing with this program, is to come and again bring information and help raise awareness to the community about really what wandering is and what people can do to get for help. And I really would encourage people today in listening to the program, if they have questions, don't hesitate to go to our website. We have excellent materials on wandering, as well as phone our First Link Dementia Helpline, because we have staff who would be very happy to talk to people on a personal level and answer their questions as best as they can.
And I know we've got some special guests lined up for today's show that hopefully can answer some questions for you as well. So now, speaking of helping those families, our very first guest on today's show is going to be Ellen Allen. She's a caregiver whose mother has dementia. Ellen is going to tell us firsthand about her family's experience with wandering. And just before we do this, I'm wondering if we can back up a little bit. So is there a true definition for what wandering is, and why is it a common concern for people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias?
Well, wandering is somewhat of a broad term for the behavior that often is seen with people with Alzheimer's dementia, which could talk about getting lost or even safety issues, safety and risk issues. It's many people think it's specifically to wandering away and then getting lost, and that is certainly one of the major ones, but it's not the only aspect of it. It's natural as a person is progressing through the disease to have a lot of cognitive changes, and hence that's really what dementia and Alzheimer's is. And as the brain is going through its changes and cognition is starting to change in many different ways, people begin to respond and react in very different ways. And that's where we often see the wandering patterns start to show up. Wandering typically is seen for people who have sort of mid to late stages of the disease, but it can show up
at any time.
At any time, and individuals who may wander have many different reasons, many different levels of awareness, and for their families and caregivers who are around them, they also have many different ways to respond and causes of concern depending upon what their own personal situation is. So it's really important to start the conversation early and be proactive in how we approach it, as opposed to waiting for the situation to happen and then it becomes very, very panicky.
And we can also make it very clear that not every person who's diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's is actually going to wander.
No, not. It again, as most people who have Alzheimer's and dementia, they are going to go through the disease very unique to their own situation and with their own symptoms and behaviors. So it is not seen in every case, but it is apparent enough that it is important to talk about. And it's also important to say that in the awareness of wandering and people who wander, it can be, and many times it is, an emergency situation. And so again, it's really important to share information, not just with families and people who have dementia, but with the community.
Absolutely.
Because that's where we begin all to become part of the ability to support and help people live more safely in our community.
Mm-hmm. So another guest on today's show is going to be Barbara Lindsay. And Barbara is the Alzheimer's Society's Director of Advocacy and Education. And she's going to be talking with us in more detail about what we can do to actually reduce the risk of wandering and what else we can do when a wandering event actually occurs. So in the meantime, can you tell us a little bit more about what, if anything, is known about the reasons that people with Alzheimer's disease or dementia might wander? You did mention it was just something like an occurrence in the brain.
Well, as people progress through the disease, the brain is going through a number of cognitive changes, and those changes can begin to have an impact on the different behaviors of individuals, which we can then see in wandering. So people might actually become confused and disoriented and might be somewhere and suddenly not know where they are and how to get to somewhere familiar. People can also begin to focus more on a memory from the past, and they may actually begin to think when they wake up in the morning, for instance, that they need to go to work, and so they may get up and go to work. People might be responding or reacting to their environment, which is confusing or frightening to them, so too much stimulus, too much noise, they're hot or they're cold, and again they will leave. And so there's a number of different reasons why a person may actually wander. Also, wandering doesn't just have to be on foot. A person can be in their car, and as an example, in an early stages, and suddenly just not recognize the Safeway parking lot, and not have an idea how to drive that distance from the Safeway parking lot to their home, which they've done umpteen times, over and over. They may be on a bus, and all of a sudden the surroundings, the bus stops, the buildings around them just doesn't seem familiar, and they don't know what to do. So there is a number of different ways, and people tend to have a different story and a different experience. And so the ability to, again, start that dialogue early with families and with people early in their diagnosis who may actually have, at that point, the ability to talk about, what should be the situations or how should we respond if this happens, is really quite critical.
So I think a lot of weight should be put on you as a community member as well, not just because someone in your family has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia. You just need to be aware of what's normal in your community or what's deemed normal in your community or your environment and what's not. To keep your eyes open, because there could be a variety of different reasons that somebody has wandered.
Absolutely. We hear some wonderful stories from families who have had experiences with their loved one who have, walked away and gone to a bus stop and have been at the bus stop for an extended period of time, and somebody driving by has seen them and thought they looked just not quite right for that bus stop, and then have come back just on their route again and seen that person
hours
again.
later, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And have stopped and just said, can I help?
Yeah.
And that is just so powerful, because there is an ability there for the community, for a person who's had no connection but whose eyes on the street has seen something unusual. And we've had some people say they've had someone ask them that, and they've said they're fine. And that's great too, because at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen if you ask them if they need help is that they say no, they don't.
Exactly. No harm done.
No harm done, right? And you may still feel that actually they need help, and that's where we go back to the idea that this is an emergency situation, and if you do feel that there is something that doesn't seem right, and even if the person says, you know what, I'm fine, I don't need help, we encourage people to phone 911. We work with the police. We talk with them about this in search and rescue, and we do encourage, and they support, to phone 911 and have a professional come and help make sure that situation is okay.
Mm-hmm. All part of making and creating a dementia-friendly community.
Exactly.
Correct. And then also in our final segment of today's show, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about another way that possibly you can get involved with the society. We know that the Alzheimer's Society of BC relies heavily on fundraising and community commitment. So we'd like to talk a little bit about the National Alzheimer Coffee Break. It's an annual campaign held every September and I think into October as well.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay, so every fall, and it helps raise funds and raises awareness for dementia. So Maria, is there a link that can be made between the topic of wandering and an event like Coffee Break?
Coffee Break is a really fun way for us to raise funds, and the Alzheimer's Society of BC has 15 different resource offices throughout the province, and through those resource offices we offer programs and services, and we reach out to families in the community to offer information. So that fun event is helping us support those offices to continue to have those services in communities across BC, so that people, no matter where you're living in the busy Lower Mainland or up in Prince George or in the far Kootenays, can have the same support and services that we all need.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the Coffee Break event as well. And I know that there are a number of exciting things happening this year, but without further ado, we're going to move forward in the program and talk to a few of our special guests. You're listening to Boomer Life on CIAL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton, along with Maria Howard, who is the CEO of the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia. We're talking about the journey of dementia. In particular, today's topic is wandering. If you want more information, please visit the website alzheimerbc.org. We'll be right back.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIAL 650.